Chapter 3, Culture. Culture and Society. Development of culture. Elements of culture. Dominant ideology. Cultural variations. Chapter 3, Culture, a wider worldview. What do you see? What are the influences coming back? If we must use concepts we have inherited from others to do sociology, psychology or philosophy or anything else, how can we ever get to anything new? Thus, since we seem unable to begin from such a rational zero point, free of any already given concepts, terms, or approaches, it appears that we are forced to repeat the past and its mistakes. Heidegger, 1927. Reconstruction is an approach, whether in philosophy, literary analysis, or in other fields, which rigorously pursues the meaning of a text or idea to the point of undoing the oppositions on which it is apparently founded, and to the point of showing that those foundations are irreducibly complex, unstable or impossible. The term was introduced by French philosopher Jacques Derrida. Reconstruction has close intellectual links to critical theory, critical thinking. Reconstruction generally attempts to demonstrate that any text is not a discrete whole, but contains several irreconcilable and contradictory meanings, that any text therefore has more than one interpretation, that the text itself links these interpretations inextricably, that the incompatibility of these interpretations is irreducible, and thus that an interpretative reading cannot go beyond a certain point. Derrida refers to this point as an aporia in the text, and terms deconstructive reading aporetic. J. Hillis Miller has described deconstruction this way. Deconstruction is not a dismantling of the structure of a text, but a demonstration that it has already dismantled itself. Its apparently solid ground is no rock, but thin air. Culture, totality of learned, socially transmitted customs, knowledge, material objects, and behavior. Culture includes all objects and ideas within a society, values, customs, and artifacts of groups of people. Does not refer to fine arts or intellectual taste. Vygotsky's 1978-1986 idea argument, human cognitive development and social action can only occur through intentionally driven activity, which occurs through the use of mediated artifacts, that is, signs and tools. Other attributes of culture. Definitions. Determinism equals people are what they learn. Anthropologists suggest that there is no universal right way of being human. Relativism equals there is no scientific standards for considering one group as intrinsically superior or inferior to another. Ethnocentrism equals the belief that one's own culture is superior to that of other cultures. It is a form of reductionism that reduces the other way of life to a distorted version of one's own. Manifestation equals cultural differences manifest themselves in different ways and differing levels of depth. Symbols represent the most superficial and values the deepest manifestations of culture, with heroes and rituals in between. Layers equals people even within the same culture carry several layers of mental programming within themselves. For instance, national, regional, gender, generational, social class, and corporate levels. Image, use a layer cake. Differences. A variable can be operationalized either by single or composite measure techniques. A single measure technique means the use of one indicator to measure the domain of a concept. The composite measure technique means the use of several indicators to construct an index for the concept after the domain of the concept has been empirically sampled. Hofstede, 1997, has devised a composite measure technique to measure cultural differences among different societies. Power distance index, The index measures the degree of inequality that exists in a society. Uncertainty Avoidance Index. The index measures the extent to which a society feels threatened by uncertain or ambiguous situations. Individualism Index. The index measures the extent to which a society is individualistic. Individualism refers to a loosely knit social framework in a society in which people are supposed to take care of themselves and their immediate families only. The other end of the spectrum would be collectivism, that occurs when there is a tight social framework in which people distinguish between in-groups and out-groups. They expect their in-groups, relatives, clans, organizations, to look after them in exchange for absolute loyalty. Masculinity Index. Achievement versus relationship. The index measures the extent to which the dominant values are assertiveness, money and things, achievement, not caring for others, or for quality of life. The other end of the spectrum would be femininity, relationship. Chapter Summary. A culture is the totality of learned, socially transmitted customs, knowledge, material objects, and behavior. Language, beliefs, values that pass from one generation to the next. This chapter examines the basic elements that make up a culture, social practices common to all cultures, and variations that distinguish one culture from another. Be a material culture, physical pieces of culture, jewelry, hairstyles and books. Non-material culture, a group's way of thinking, values, beliefs, and doing, common behavior, language and gestures. See cultural transmission, preserving and communicating of culture. Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Language influences or even determines our conscious perceptions of the world. Mills, 1959 article. Innovation. Process of introducing a new idea or object to a culture. Innovation may take the form of either discovery or invention. Discovery, making known or sharing existence of an aspect of reality. Invention, when existing cultural items are combined into a form that did not exist before. Globalization, diffusion, and technology. Globalization, worldwide integration of government policies, cultures, social movements, and financial markets through trades and the exchange of ideas. Diffusion, process by which a cultural item spreads from group to group or society to society. Technology, cultural information about how to use the material resources of the environment to satisfy human needs and desires. Nolan and Lenski, 1999. Accelerates the diffusion of scientific innovations. Transmits culture. Sociobiology, systematic study of how biology affects human social behavior. Founded on Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Sociobiologists assert that many cultural traits are rooted in genetic makeup. Continued chapter summary. 1. A shared culture helps to define the group or society to which we belong. Cultural variation. Culture shock. Feeling disoriented, uncertain, out of place, or fearful when immersed in an unfamiliar culture. 2. Anthropologist George Murdoch compiled a list of cultural universals, or general practices found in every culture, including marriage, sports, cooking, medicine, and sexual restrictions. 3. Human culture is constantly expanding through the process of innovation, which includes both discovery and invention. 4. Diffusion, the spread of cultural items from one place to another, has fostered globalization. But people resist ideas that seem too foreign, as well as those they perceive as threatening to their own values and beliefs. Language. Nonverbal communication. Use of gestures, facial expressions, and other visual images to communicate. Not the same in all cultures. learned just as we learn other forms of language. Dominant ideology describes the set of cultural beliefs and practices that help to maintain powerful social, economic, and political interests. Control wealth and property. Control the means of producing beliefs about reality through religion, education, the media. 5. Language, abstract system of word meanings and symbols for all aspects of culture. Language both describes culture and shapes it. Includes speech, written characters, numerals, symbols, and gestures and expressions of nonverbal communication. Language precedes thought. Language is not a given. Language is not a given. Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Continued chapter summary. 6. Sociologists distinguish between norms in two ways, classifying them either as formal or informal or as mores or folkways. 7. The formal norms of a culture will receive the heaviest sanctions. Informal norms will carry light sanctions. 8. The dominant ideology of a culture is the set of cultural beliefs and practices that help to maintain powerful social, economic, and political interests. 9. In a sense, a subculture can be thought of as a small culture that exists within a larger, dominant culture. Countercultures are subcultures that deliberately oppose aspects of the larger culture. 10. People who measure other cultures by the standard of their own engage in ethnocentrism. By contrast, cultural relativism is the practice of viewing people from the perspective of their own culture. 11. The social policy of bilingualism calls for the use of two or more languages, treating each as equally legitimate. It is supported by those who want to ease the transition of non-native language speakers into a host society, but opposed by those who adhere to a single cultural tradition and language.